Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast AI, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. Today, I am thrilled to welcome my new friend and fellow Boston resident, Elizabeth Miner, onto the show. Elizabeth is an executive coach, speaker, author, and community builder, working with both groups and individuals around the world to create pathways and develop actionable plans to make anything her clients dream a reality. With a background in the legal space, working in specialties from Supreme Court litigation to multinational corporations, Elizabeth changed course roughly 15 years ago to work with entrepreneurs and businesses across the globe. Among the projects she's helped spearhead today is the Boston Beauty Coalition, a community of fashion entrepreneurs based here in the Hub that helps beauty startups access the resources and community they need to scale their growth. I'm thrilled to finally have a local friend on the show and can't wait to hear Elizabeth's take on both the local and global startup ecosystem, the unique challenges of working in fashion, the innovation she sees every day, and her plans for the future. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to represent Boston as a next door neighbor.
I love it.
So glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Elizabeth. Like I said earlier, I so rarely get to speak to folks in the United States, let alone in my own backyard. So it was a pleasure meeting you and being able to make this connection happen. I'd love to know, I looked at your background. We've chatted through it. Could you tell me a little bit about how you got to the role you're in today? It's a very, very impressive resume that you've built up. And I don't think I can do it justice in my quick little bio right there.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know how impressive it is. It's just a matter of following the spark, right? So I was a paralegal for many years, and I worked with entrepreneurs and startups. And then I moved into multinationals back in 2008 when I thought my little boutique law firm was going to get rid of the only paralegal because I was one paralegal and 7 attorneys. And I thought, geez, out of the people here, I'm the one expendable person. So I moved over to multinationals, where I started to get some international corporate experience. And I went from there. Apple courted me. They brought me across the country. I worked with their multinational subsidiary management, and I got more experience there. And then I thought, this is all good and well. I'm making good money, moving companies and making the shareholders a lot of money. But I'd really rather work with people with their dreams. And so I started to do that. I started to work with people that wanted to build their own companies. And so from there, I decided, why am I living in the most expensive state in all of the US while I'm doing this? This is kind of silly. And I thought, where do I want to be? And I was like, you know what? I want to explore. So my kids had left the nest and I moved to Panama. And that started a 8-year journey of nomadic life where I've lived in Panama, Colombia, Tenerife, which is an island in Spain, Morocco. I've lived all over the world, and I've built communities every place I've dropped for a little bit of time. And those communities I've helped build businesses in wherever they're living because I had that background. So that's really, it just was kind of chasing the spark. It's kind of a crooked path.
I love it though, chasing the spark. All right, title of episode. But I just love that too. You leaned on community and you've built the communities in each one of these locations. Full disclosure, I met you at the bar. It was fantastic networking experience, but you saw I was reading something that was relevant to my business. I had my headphones on when I walked in and you're like, what are you doing? I was going to a podcast. We started talking about podcasts. It was a very, very organic interaction, but there was a spark there and you followed it. And now we're here today. So I've seen proof in action, Elizabeth, of the great stuff that you can do in building those communities. Could you tell me a little bit about one of the communities that you're working on today or some of the most exciting projects that you have your hand in now? Because I know there's a few.
There's quite a few, but I came back to the Boston area at some point during the pandemic. I came back to the US during the pandemic because family was here and I wanted to be close to them. I lived out in the West Coast for a little bit and then came back to Boston when there was a family situation. So came back to be close to family and help my family through their ordeal, and ended up here and working with some clients. And a couple of the clients were in the beauty and fashion industry, and they're struggling with a few things. And so I did my normal, okay, what you need to do is network. And they're like, yeah, Boston is a life sciences and a tech place. Go to a place and say you're a hair specialist or a fashion designer. Nobody wants to talk to you. So I was like, well, I'll just find it for you. And I looked around and I'm like, oh my goodness, you're right. There's nothing out here. Well, we can fix that. So that's what I decided to do. I created Boston Beauty Coalition. Right now, it's a year ago, based on just a need I saw. I'm not from the beauty industry. I'm not from the fashion industry. I have no background there, but I have the corporate experience. Creatives are inherently challenged by the whole other side of the brain stuff. And so, what I'm trying to do is help them with education, learning sessions, connections, networking with each other, and then ancillary providers, the HR specialists, the payroll specialists, the attorneys. So many people, they don't have the proper attorney agreements in place. ChatGPT is not your solution to your legal documents. Please,
Yeah.
people, please, in any
Um,
industry.
that is a point that cannot be made too often. ChatGPT is not a lawyer, and it will, with confidence, tell you some awful things. So I'm right there with you. And Elizabeth, I love that point you made about creatives kind of being challenged in accessing that other side of the brain. I know it's not a one-to-one, but in the really, really, really deep tech space that we have worked in before, it is the same thing. A
Absolutely.
founder is focused on their dream. They're focused on their vision. They had a great idea. They want to make it a reality. They want it to rocket up past the growth phase and become a big business that they're proud of. But they're not built with that toolkit inherently to know how to navigate the business space, know who the partners are going to be, know what kind of investors they want, for instance, if that's the path they want to go, know when to hand over equity, for instance, versus tap into non-dilutive funding options. It's all questions that they could totally get bogged down and lost in trying to answer themselves if they don't have those members of the community to help them. And that's a big thing that we do here at Boast. Again, we're not necessarily in the fashion space, but we are with startups of all kinds, and we love partnering with them to take that burden off. And I love to hear that that's what you're doing with the Beauty Coalition as well. Could you tell me a little bit about some of the great founders or some of the great creatives that you're working with and the cool stuff that you guys are doing? I know that there's events coming up. There's been events in the past, but yeah, what's on the roadmap and who are some of your favorites so far, even though I know it's hard and impossible to pick a favorite, but
Absolutely. So, but just to your point, founders of all types, they just want to do the thing, right?
mm-hmm.
They just want to do the thing. And it's hard for them to pick their head up and look around. So they need to really connect up with other people that can do that for them. So to your point, that's a huge benefit to anybody. If you just want to do your thing, make sure you look around and get somebody else to do the other stuff. And there are people that would love to do that part because they can't do the thing that you're doing. Projects I'm working on right now, there's so many. I just came back from New York Fashion Week, where I was working with Vava Zadi, which is a fashion designer here from the Ivory Coast. He actually is here in the Boston area, has been for quite some time, and calls Boston home now. And we were exhibiting 50 of his newest looks from his fall line, which is fantastic. That was great fun. Huge experience I've never ever been through before. It was amazing. So that was a lot of fun. Next week, Boston Beauty Coalition has their 1 year anniversary party. So that's going to be fun. I hope to see you there.
Absolutely.
And we're bringing in people from these ancillary communities. There's bankers, there's attorneys, there's payroll providers and bookkeepers coming, as well as everybody that falls under beauty. Everybody from the tattoo artist to the eyelash extension person to the makeup artist and to the fashion designer. And those people that are looking to get into the business and don't know how. So that's the group that will be gathering next week. So those are some of the things that I do. We're running a fashion show for another designer, Boston-based designer, in December called Excessive Fashion. And that designer is Joe Malika. And one of the things that makes that runway show fascinating is the charity partner that we have connected with, which also comes from the Boston area, called A Leg Forever. And there were two brothers during the Boston Marathon that each lost a portion of their leg during the Boston Marathon bombing. And their mother ended up creating a charity to help people with the additional costs associated with getting prosthetic limbs. And so she created this charity, A Leg Forever, and Joe Malika is going to be partnering with A Leg Forever as their charity partner. And we have a whole bunch of people that are going to be gracing the runway in their prosthetic devices and showing that beauty is absolutely for everyone.
I mean, that's a very, very Boston, I feel like, initiative right there, just because you said it earlier. We're a life sciences town. It's a great thing. We're very, very proud of it, but you don't think fashion when you think of Boston. You think of the opposite. We get ragged on everywhere I go.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, yeah, you're like sweatpants because you're up all night working. You're not going out partying in your nice dresses or anything like that. You're really just hitting the groundstone trying to do some research. That's what people view Boston. And I love to hear that we're starting to break that perception, just as a Bostonian myself.
Yes.
I like to think I went to Emerson. We're a fashionable bunch. I think that there's a lot more fashion on the ground and on the streets in Boston than gets credit for, honestly, especially this summer. It might just be that we woke up from the pandemic and we remembered how to dress and it was fantastic. But it's been very, very interesting. Like walking down Boylston Street, they set up the new markets there where they have like fashion from new designers and everything. I was surprised to see that because that wasn't there when I went to Emerson, and just to see people that aren't even just students, people who live in the city and from all corners of the city coming out. I love to see that our perceptions at least being changed, and I'm seeing it in action on the ground. And then going back to that second point about A Light Forever and partnering with the community and partnering with the different members of our ecosystem. Sure, it might not on its face seem like, hey, a charity and this fashion organization are going to be good bedfellows, but this sounds perfect. It sounds like the perfect interaction. And again, something that highlights all the strengths of our community. So it's really, really cool to hear that you're making this happen, that you have such great partners in the ecosystem who are making this happen, and also that the ecosystem isn't just people who are in fashion. It's not just creatives. It's people on all sides. That's what we love to hear, and I think is a huge tenet of how the customers who we work with, that's how they succeed. They don't put blinders on. They don't just assume, hey, I'm swimming in this lane. If they see an opportunity for growth, they're going to hop on it. So yeah, that is awesome to hear. I'd love to know too a little bit about how, I know you said that you weren't originally in the fashion space necessarily. It was a lot more about kind of getting companies and getting founders and getting those individuals ready to make their dream happen. Could you tell me a little bit about maybe the criteria that you look at in a founder or in a dreamer who you want to help make their vision a reality?
There's so many things that make a great founder, and we all know them, but it's hard to quantify, right? It's like, how do you know love? Well, you just know it when you see it, right? And that's not fair. But the drive, the absolute drive for somebody to realize their dream, this whole idea that, follow your passion, being a croc, there's balance to that. You have to be passionate in order to weather the storm. It's no easy feat. You have to be able to, eat ramen for a month because you got no money coming in. And you have to be able to stand up in front of investors and say, hey, this is worth your money and my sweat. I've got something good here. Take a look. So you have to have a lot of that in order to be a successful founder, in my opinion. You have to have the dreams, you have to have the passion, and You have to have realism. You have to understand that you're not it. Anytime somebody says, well, I don't have competition, I'm the first ever. I'm like, probably not. Probably not. And so you need to go back out there and look. If you are all business and you are not picking your head up and having a life, that's not somebody that I'm going to be able to help. Somebody else will, maybe, but I believe in the whole person, and you cannot sustain that. And I've just heard too many burnout stories, seen too many burnout stories that I can't really help you.
Yep.
So my sweet spot, the place, and I work with people in all stages, but my sweet spot is I've got all these ideas. Which one do I do? Where do I go? And how do I make this a reality? That's my fun stuff. I've got all these ideas. Where do I go? Where do I go? Which one do I choose? I want to do them all. I'm a multi-passionate. I'm like, yeah, and let's start and move, right?
Yep, absolutely. I love the point you made about being realistic too, because I've said it before, unique innovation, people with big dreams, those are the people who we want to work with. And those people who have the hunger and the thirst to really get that program in place. But if they're just disparate and they love everything and they really, really just want to make everything their passion, like I bristle a little bit at the word multi-passionate just because not that I think you can't have more than one passion, but to your point about having a life too, be passionate about your family or be passionate about your home, be passionate about your well-being, your mental health, as well as what you want your professional goals to be. Make sure that there's a fine line there too. They can bleed over, of course. Like I've said to you before, my favorite thing is talking and telling these stories. It's not even just a work passion. I'm just fortunate to work in a field where I can do it. But having that separation so that you are a human. I just want to reiterate that point. Working with humans is so, so important, especially not to digress in this age of AI and generative AI,
Right.
ChatGPT, and yeah, all of that. Another point you made too was about making that pitch, but also making it clear that your sweat equity is what's going to be the difference here. I've talked
Mm.
to a lot of founders who have emphasized a very similar point. Don't spend all your time necessarily crafting the perfect pitch. Demonstrate that you do the work, that you are what they're investing in, that you as an individual are rolling up your sleeves and you're putting in the work. If you're not a designer, you're going to become a designer until you can hire somebody to do it. If you're not a podcaster, you're going to learn how to do it. You're going to buy the mic, you're going to get the Zoom set up, and you're going to put some curtains up around your closet and hop in and get it done.
Yeah.
Those are the ones who make it happen. And that's what I think is kind of a key ingredient. So I'm glad to hear that you agree with that too, Elizabeth.
Oh, absolutely. And I've worked with a lot of investors, and really they love the product, otherwise they wouldn't be looking at you, but they are investing in the founder. They're investing in your ability to make this go, because so many people have great ideas. That's great. But if you don't have the person that's going to drive it, they can't invest. There's no clear path for them. There's no, it loses a whole lot for them. And I was just in a session through Boston Startup Week about co-founders and when one leaves, and that dead equity, right? Of that space where there's nothing coming in, and there's a portion of the company that's missing. And that's really kind of what I think of when an investor looks at you and goes, they're not fully committed. And that does not mean that they are not spending time with their family. That means that they're really driven with this idea and they're going to get it done. So those are two different things. And I think we are totally aligned in that space. But it's work-life integration. You got to love what you do. And it bleeds in naturally to everything. So you can still be at a bar, or you can still be someplace and enjoying yourself and talking about something you're passionate about that happens to be your business.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. Especially to the point about being at the bar. I had been recording a podcast earlier that day. I had my spiel in my back pocket for how to like pitch boast to anybody who asked about it, but I'd signed off. I was going to another podcast recording. It wasn't business related, but I still was thinking the whole time, I'm like, ooh, taking notes. How can I improve my work based on what I'm seeing live on stage or just comparing mics? So I
Yeah.
hear you. It's integration into your
Yeah.
life. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love it. Now, you did speak a little bit about you have worked with companies on getting investment and you've worked with investors too. Any advice on navigating investment, funding, just growth or capital strategies in the current market? I had mentioned before, we started out as a Canadian company, but we are purely all of North America. I had mentioned also, I was in San Francisco last week. We're really trying to make a push for some new brands and some new clients on the West Coast. But what in whether Boston or just the US or even globally, what are some of the challenges and maybe what are some of the advice that you would give to startups looking to get investment today? I know we have touched on some points as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I continually tell people because I don't know, I think there's been too much Shark Tank going on here that everybody feels like they need to give up equity in
Mm-hmm.
order to get investment. And that can't be farther from the truth because there are so many different investment vehicles. And if I could tell one story and make one point for all the listeners out there. And I don't care what space, industry, or market you're working in, it's that you don't always have to give up equity in order to get funding. There are all different vehicles. Talk with your legal professional, talk with your investors. Like, what do they need to get out of this? Can it be a safe note? Can it be debt equity? Can it be restricted stock? Can it be like, what can you do that doesn't necessarily give away the farm? So many people are so anxious to just get this off the ground and they'll do anything to do that. And then it gets off the ground and they realize they've deluded themselves. One thing that people forget is that once you take an investor, you no longer run the company. You
Yep.
answer to a board, you answer to somebody else. And I have been a legal professional watching a CEO get unseated from the board of her own company and unseated from the CEO position because they didn't like the way she was running the company. She was a great founder, a terrible CEO, and they removed her from her own company. It was my first experience ever. It was not my last, I'm sad to say, but it was the first experience I had that I saw a founder get removed from their own company. That's possible. Now, it may be for the good of your company and it may actually make you a lot of money, and that's great. But you want to know what you're getting into when you're taking that investment. Really understand that, and people miss that. So that's really the thing. What I'm seeing that investments aren't dead. There's so much noise about, oh yeah, VC money is dried up. It's not. They're looking for what they're looking for, and you have to be able to meet the parameters of what the investor is looking for. But it's work. You don't
Mm-hmm.
just show up on Shark Tank. It's work. You're going to pitch a lot to a
Yes.
lot of people. Get
Mm-hmm.
yourself a pitch coach. Get yourself an attorney that helps you refine or make introductions. Attorneys are phenomenal. I've worked in a law firm, and that's one of the things that law firms will do for you. They will make introductions to investors. They know them. So get
Mm-hmm.
yourself a good law firm.
That is fantastic advice. I am so glad you brought up the Shark Tank of it all, too. I think we had mentioned that before when we had chatted in the past, but everyone just assumes the table stakes is okay. What percentage of my business are you going to take? Because that's how they present it on the show. And I'm like, not every avenue is going to take you to Mark Cuban. Not every avenue is going to take you to Barbara. You want to do as much as you can to bootstrap it yourself and get yourself as far as you can before you hand over that equity. Whether that's in Canada, the CRA has the SHRED funding program. That's a big part of what we do as a business. It is free cash that the government wants to give you for technological innovation. If you're in fashion tech too, any kind of innovation that you can prove it is objective, it is something that you need to have a partner who can help make the claim for you, but it is cash that you can put back into your runway that isn't handing over equity to somebody else. That isn't going to put you in that position in 10 years where you've elevated yourself to CEO and now you're being stripped of everything.
Right.
As long as you can get that runway and access those sources of funding, there's more out there than you know, probably. I know I've referenced the Canadian program up in the US too. It's not just tax credits. There are amazing programs that will give you funding without asking for equity. They want to see your success because it's success for them and their ecosystem as well. Whether that's from the government or whether that's from academia, there are options, but look for those options. Don't, again, just think that Shark Tank's the way to go. I do love Shark Tank, not
I
to
do.
poo-poo them too much, by the way. Yeah.
I do. I love that. And Mark Cuban is a leader
Oh,
that
yeah.
I look to on a regular basis. But to your point, the other thing is look to your municipality wherever you are, because what they're interested in is building revenue for the municipality. So they benefit when your business succeeds. There are grants, there is money that is being handed out to people who are asking for it if they meet the requirements. So it's work. Yeah.
Mhm.
And if you're too busy doing your thing, hire somebody, contract somebody to do the looking, to fill out the forms, to apply for the grants.
Mhm.
Do what you need to do to access money to help you with runway. There's
Yeah.
so much out there, and people need to just look outside of VC. We're not all
Mhm.
Facebook or Meta or Alphabet or whatever.
Right.
Like, go look for these programs. If you're in tech, there's certain tech stuff. If you're in beauty and fashion, there might be beauty and fashion stuff. I know Sephora does
Yeah.
some work with beauty designers. There's all sorts of different things. Different designers that have made it big are now paying it forward by helping with grants and money. ifundwomen.com. If you are a female founder, there are founders of color that get access to certain grants. Like, there's all different things. Go out there. There's a wealth of money that doesn't require an equity drain in order to get you the runway you need to succeed. Use
Mhm.
it. Please,
Absolutely. Yeah.
please.
Please, it is there. Like, please take advantage of it. And I love you made that point about your municipalities too. I had mentioned earlier, I have some pals at York IE up in New Hampshire. When you think of New Hampshire, you don't think of them as a tech hub. There is funding mechanisms in place now because Manchester wants to be a tech hub. Portsmouth wants to be a tech hub. That's just one state. There are 50 states, and this is in the US. So, especially I feel like in lieu of the R&D tax credit program being as robust today as it used to be,
Mhm.
we're all haggling with the Section 174 of it all. It's just a little tougher to get that free money from the federal government, but municipalities, localities, state governments, they're picking up the slack. So find out, they want to grow the tax base. They want you to stay there. They will give you the resources to build your success that they can reap the benefits of. And it doesn't necessarily, again, mean an equity stake in your business. It will pay back to them, whether that's more brands in the ecosystem that they can say, hey, I partnered with this group and that we're all going to lift each other, or a larger tax base if we're going to look at the municipality. So it's not cynical to do it that way. The money's out there, it's free, it's on the table. Latch onto it, take advantage of it. I love it. Yeah. And so, Elizabeth, I know we had mentioned too, we got some events this week. Boston Startup Week is happening. Caught me off guard. I know that you have been there, and I know that Mass Challenge is doing some fun stuff. But before we sign off, want to just maybe let me know what's on your calendar for the week and then for the next few months too. I know that you had said the 1 year anniversary is happening next week for Boston Beauty Coalition. So, what's your calendar looking like?
Oh gosh, I'm at Boston Startup Week. Mass Challenge is having a few events, and I was talking with Vivek yesterday, who is running
I'll
Techstars in
confirm.
Boston. He's doing some stuff. I know that next week he can't make my anniversary party, which he wants to go to. Because he's doing a what to expect at Techstars. And so there was a gentleman that came up and talked with us while we were chatting. And he's like, well, what happens if I miss a day? I was like, listen, when somebody builds a weekend program that's going to take you from idea to team to product in a course of a weekend, don't miss a day. Go to the program. You're going to miss one brick in that wall, and your wall is not going to be the same. So that's coming up in the Boston area. I mean, there's so much in Boston that's going on. It's crazy. Venture Cafe is a place I spend a lot of time in. Roxbury Innovation Center. They're somebody I spend a lot of time with. There's so many really great incubation organizations. I have mentees that I'm working with through all these programs. E for All, I do a lot of work with them. I have a mentee in Providence, and I have a mentee here in Boston through those programs, which is quite fun. I'm working on a book right now, my next in a series of emotional intelligence. So I wrote one about emotional intelligence for entrepreneurs called The Entrepreneur Advantage. And that just really helps people develop their emotional intelligence so that they can be better entrepreneurs. Because my theory is people aren't failing because of industry or market. They're just not emotionally intelligent to weather the storm and figure out how these events might affect how they present, how they work, how they make choices. So get that kind of worked into your process, and you'll be far more successful. So I'm doing my next book in that series for sales professionals. So you can do better in sales if you are emotionally intelligent, and we're going to work you through that process. So super excited about that one.
I'm excited to tell some folks I know about that book when it comes out. And again, I'm selfishly so happy to be talking to somebody who's in my backyard. We speak to so many folks from across North America, but I know there's awesome stuff happening in Boston. It's not all just life sciences. And I'm so glad to be speaking with somebody who's on the front edge of all of that. So, Elizabeth, I cannot thank you enough.
It's my absolute pleasure. And we got to continue to talk, continue to network, everybody.
Yes.
There's so many people I want to introduce you to, that some we already know in common, and some that really you need to talk to. They're right up your alley. So I cannot wait to introduce you to them.
Oh, I'm excited. Yeah, I really, really look forward to talking to people in person too. That's going to be fantastic. So, Elizabeth, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, thank you for this. I really, really appreciate all your efforts.
Of course, my pleasure.
Can't wait to see you next week.
See you next week.